Okay, so just talked about some of the risks and the ethical implications of AI, but we're just covering at a very high level some of the legal ramifications. I'm no legal expert and definitely worth taking good advice on this, but there's quite a lot of emerging law around AI that still needs to be proven, still needs to be thought about. One of the things that is quite sort of interesting and probably the most prominent legal discussion at the moment is around intellectual property. And IP law is a very specialist subject, and as I said, I'm no specialist in this field. But if you think about two aspects really, one is if an AI engine has been trained on the open internet, that's actually looking at lots of people's intellectual property. It's web pages and pictures on the internet. And there's quite a lot of interesting cases being tested at the moment in the US around whether an AI engine has stolen IP if it's used a web page to be trained and then created something new out of it. And so if you are a procurement person, you definitely need to understand who is responsible for IP protections associated with the data on which an AI engine's been trained. The second thing is who owns the IP of the thing that's being created by the AI engine. Now, again, lots of discussion around this at the moment. I don't think we've quite nailed that one down in terms of legal definitions, but if a product creates a new picture or a new video or a piece of web content, is that IP owned by the product that created it, or is it owned by the business who bought the product? And all those sorts of things you need to be really clear on. IP infringement, clearly quite a big area of legal dispute, and so certainly worth considering how you deal with that in that context. The other point I made previously was related to data privacy. Now, data privacy in its own right comes with fairly horrendous risks. You would not believe this, but a Spitfire's just gone overhead. That's the Solent for you, mate. I love it here. Anyway, right. So data privacy. So there's lots of implications of AI and data privacy. Clearly, the big ones are things like GDPR. If you are putting your data into an AI engine, the chances are it is going to go beyond geographical boundaries. And so from a GDPR perspective, you need to get your head around where your data's going, all the same sort of things that we discussed previously around the cloud and where data needs to be governed by. Some of the more nuanced legal implications that's probably worth a bit of thought are things like employment law. If AI genuinely is going to be replacing people's jobs, we probably need to have a bit of a think about what the redundancy implications of that are, what employment protections are in place for replacing individuals with AI engines. And so in that context, employment law is probably an area that is going to evolve over time as the jobs market changes to support AI doing a lot more work within the workplace. And in that context, the job situation is also one that's probably worth a bit more discussion. There's a lot of discussion on the internet about AI won't take your job, somebody using AI will. And to a large extent, I subscribe to that. I think if you're proficient with AI engines, you're probably more efficient at doing your job than maybe someone who doesn't understand that. And therefore, you are likely to be competing with people who are a lot more efficient than you because they use the AI tools to support that. But there's a question mark about whether AI itself will actually take your job. 2 seconds. Bryn, can you have a look at the depth? How are we doing on depth? Okay, so the AI engine side of things is potentially going to take people's jobs, and it's largely going to be related to jobs that involve learning a lot of data and then making recommendations. So if you think things like lawyers who look at a lot of case law, doctors who look at a lot of medical background and patterns around that, all those things could be replaced by AI or AI engines because of the data consumption and the recommendations. But also, if you think about those two job examples, they're the ones that have got probably the biggest ethical implications. So there's a long way to go to make sure we understand how those things can work. But in the context of legal replacement of jobs, that's certainly something that people need to consider, and certainly something that people need to understand from an employment law perspective and those sorts of things. So lots of legalities. There's lots of other legalities around license ownership of the models, all those sorts of things. From a procurement perspective, you really do need to understand what you're buying, what your risks are, and make sure you're protecting yourself and your business from some of those risks going forward in terms of the legal contract construct.